Welcome to Talking Out Your Glass. I'm Sean Wagoner. Upon graduation from the Tyler School of Art and Architecture with a BFA in Glass, Gemma Hollister was awarded the Windgate-Lamar Fellowship from the Center for Craft, which allowed her and her partner to start a small studio in Philadelphia, Antolini Glass Co. While balancing her personal artistic practice and work as a production glassblower, the artist recently appeared on Netflix's Blown Away Extreme Heat. The show inspired new work, which she made both in her own studio and during a residency at Monterey Glassworks. States Hollister, Blown Away gave me a chance to challenge myself and level up my skills in glassmaking. It isn't very often that you are given such specific parameters and a time crunch to make your work. I gained so much confidence in myself as a gaffer and as an artist. Looking back, it was also very special to me to be able to represent a younger generation of glassblowers, especially female glassblowers, on such a big stage. A 2023 Sachs Emerging Artist nominee, Hollister developed a practice that involves creating fantastical objects, sculptures, and installations that center around themes of imagination and control, manifesting as both literal and abstract sculpture. For her, working with glass is an exercise in the belief that her own actions directly affect change. She works to further understand the material so that she can control its outcomes by working with direction and intention. She says, the act of creating glass, as in many crafts, is a protest against an unresolved and rapidly evolving technological world. Glass historically has proven the power to educate, inspire, and call to action those who observe it. In my practice, I manipulate traditional associations with both blown and stained glass, its narrative structure and divine light, by addressing contemporary issues that I want viewers to reflect upon. Hollister has traveled the country as a student and teaching assistant at institutions such as the Corning Museum of Glass and Pilchuck Glass School. She received a partial workshop scholarship from CMOG in 2024 and a Pilchuck Glass School Summer Staff Scholarship in 2023. She has been a teaching assistant to both hot glass and stained glass greats such as Martin Yanetsky, Jason McDonald, Bill Gudenrath, Aya Oki, and Judith Schechter. Hollister participated in Blown Away Season 4 group exhibition at the Corning Museum of Glass in 2024, an exhibition with Karen Willenbrink Johnson and Morgan Peterson at Traver Gallery, and a solo exhibition titled Heaven is Full of Junk in 2022. She will teach at the Corning Museum of Glass August 9th through 22nd, 2026. Many thanks to the sponsors of this episode of Talking Out Your Glass: His Glassworks Incorporated, the Corning Museum of Glass, Mobile Glass Flowing Studios, LLC, the Art Alliance for Contemporary Glass, Wet Dog Glass, and Haystack Mountain School. To find out more about our sponsors, visit talkingoutyourglass.com, click on Episodes, Season 10, and Gemma Hollister. A special heartfelt thank you to our new Patreon co-producer of the show, Carissa Gregorio. Gemma Hollister, thank you so much for joining me on Talking Out Your Glass podcast.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Sean. I am honored to be among all these people that you've interviewed. I've listened to the show before, and I feel like a little, I don't know, I'm like, oh, I can't believe I'm a part of it. So thank you so much.
You bet. And I'm excited to talk to you today. I wanted to start out by asking you, you began working with glass at Tyler School of Art and Architecture, where you graduated in December 2021 with a BFA in glass. Which came first for you, your interest in stained glass or your interest in blown glass? And what were your goals while you were at Tyler?
That's an interesting question because, when I first went to Tyler, I had no idea I would be studying glass. I had done ceramics in high school, and, it's crazy when you're 18 and you have to decide what you're going to do for the rest of your life. It's pretty intimidating. So I had an art teacher in high school. The very last day the application for the Tyler School of Art was open, he was like, you should check out the school, you should apply. I went there because I'd been doing ceramics in high school. So I had checked it out, and upon visiting thought, I have to go here. And it was initially because I saw the hot shop and I saw the metals jewelry and CAD CAM studio there. And I had this idea that I was going to go to school and be a graphic designer because I wanted a real job. I didn't think that there were jobs and careers in studio arts, even though that was where my passion lied. And eventually I came to be interested in hot glass. I'd actually seen it first at the Bucks County Community College, just kind of wandering by, and then um, took a glass class at Tyler. Chris Rimmen was my very first teacher, and I just fell in love. And it was funny, I initially had no interest in stained glass, but when Judith Schechter is your teacher, you become pretty interested pretty quickly. And so my
I
last semester was, yeah, it was with Judith. I know you've interviewed her before.
Yes, I have. I love Judith. She's one of
She's
my faves.
incredible.
She
How
is.
could you not be in
How
love
would
with
you
stained
not love
glass?
her?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. And so it was coming up on my thesis show. I'd taken her class and then sort of had an interest in both because I was blowing the flashed glass to use in my stained glass, and that's sort of how it evolved.
Well, how do those two ways of working with glass fit into your practice and overall body of work? Are they complements or completely
Mhm.
separate ways of expressing for you?
Well, I guess inherently they're complements. So when I'd taken Judith's class, um, well, we were using Lambert's glass, which is super beautifully flashed, but also quite expensive. And so at the time, I was in college and I thought, okay, what's a means to an end of being able to create these projects in stained glass that I want? Oh, I have the skills to blow that glass, and to make those pieces. And so they do inform each other in that it makes it possible sometimes for me to find creative solutions to get things done. But I think when learning blown glass, it's taken, I've only been blowing glass for about 6 years now. When I was in school, it was even less, about three. And so I didn't really have the skills to express my thoughts in blown glass. And the learning curve was a bit different with stained glass. And so I found it an easier way to express the work I was thinking of at the time. And so I think there are two things that are sort of growing in parallel. But yeah, if that answers the question.
Yeah. Do you find that one like stained glass satisfies your need to sort of work slowly and meticulously, and blown
Hmm.
glass is more of a spontaneous process?
Yeah, I would say the more I blow glass, the more impatient I've become, especially working. I do production glass all day, and so pieces will take maybe 2 minutes or 5 minutes or 30 minutes, but stained glass work will take me days and weeks and months. And so I think it does satisfy this part in me that wants to be slow and take attention to detail, but it's also like a really good thing for me to trick my brain into saying like it's actually okay to take a really long time on a piece. It's actually okay to invest a lot of time on something. And even if I'm impatient, I think it's a good exercise for my brain to do stained glass and work on things in parts.
Well, you've traveled throughout the country in pursuit of further technical glass education, and you've studied at institutions such as Corning Museum of Glass, Pilchuck Glass School. Talk about some of those experiences and how they propelled you forward as an artist.
I would say, people ask me often after having done Blown Away, or, we're always posting online. I'm at Corning, I'm at Pilchuck at these places. And I think since the beginning, my motto has kind of been like, shoot your shot and you're going to be able to learn something. And I've been fortunate enough to have a lot of opportunities recently to take classes and be a teaching assistant. And every single one of those experiences feels like in Candyland, I get to jump the bridge into like a further development of myself as an artist. The first time I went to a class was actually at the Tulsa Glass Blowing School, and that would just like rocked my world. It was just so crazy. I was taking a class with Devin Burgess, and Cedric Mitchell was one of the students in the class. My current partner Tate was one of the students in the class, and I was just surrounded by all of this talent and also just people who were like out there doing it, people who were real life glass artists. And so that was the first time that I kind of saw that outside of an educational space. So I think getting the opportunity to travel and just be around people who are doing the thing you want to do been has been really incredible for me to see.
Well, upon graduation from Tyler, you were awarded the Windgate-Lamar Fellowship from the Center for Craft, which allowed you to start a small studio in Philadelphia with your partner. Describe and discuss that award, your partner, and your studio.
Mhm. So the Windgate-Lamar Fellowship is granted to 10 graduating seniors from uh, Bachelor of Fine Arts programs throughout the country. So you have to be nominated by your institution and then fill out an application. And that was like one of those things I thought like wouldn't have a shot, but I put my all towards it. I was going like to my college's writing center and working on my application and doing all this stuff. And it was Jessica Jane Julius who had nominated me for the fellowship. So once I had received it, it was essentially like a no strings attached $15,000, which is such an incredible award. And I had that summer been working at Pilchuck in the kitchen. I was taking a class at Haystack, and the timing sort of aligned that my partner and I had been thinking, okay, when I get back to Philadelphia, maybe we'll work together, starting this production company and everything. And then this incredible resource just sort of, I mean, it didn't present itself. I know that I did earn it, but it feels like it appeared out of nowhere. And I was suddenly able to like afford a small furnace. Also, being fortunate enough to be in a time where you can buy mobile furnaces that aren't $60,000, they're $10,000. And so, yeah, we found this industrial space in Philadelphia, pulled our money together. And that was the Wingate Lamar Fellowship sort of launched everything that I've been able to do now. And it was pretty much a lot of hard work and a lot of luck and a lot of good timing. And it just came at the perfect time.
What's the name of your studio, and are you still in that same location?
Yes. So our business together is Antolini Glass Co. And we are in the same building as we were before, but in the past year, I've moved to a bigger space, which is very exciting. So before our space, I was working on a show at the Traver Gallery with Karen Willenbrink and Morgan Peterson. And all of a sudden, I was like looking at the walls, and it was like all of our stuff had just sort of closed in around us, and we were selling enough of our production glass that we were like, okay, I think we can move to a bigger space. So same location, just down the hall now, which is really exciting.
So, what inspired you to apply for Blown Away Extreme Heat 2024? And what was happening with your practice at that time that made that seem like a great idea?
So at the time, we had just been moving we were in our small studio in Philly in Kensington, and I, you know, I had a couple people randomly tell me, "Oh, you should apply for Blown Away." And the show had actually come out when I just started blowing glass. So the first season came out. It was great. I got to watch it with my parents, and I was like, "This is what I'm learning. This is what I'm doing." And so it was pretty special. And I applied after Jess Julius had sent me the application. I was like, "Okay, I'll do it." There's no way I'm going to get on this season, but um, I'm gonna again shoot my shot and just go hard on this application and fill it out. And at the time, we had kind of just gotten our studio together and had like absolutely no money, no anything. And so when I had gotten on the show, I got like a per diem for every single episode that I would make it to. It was only like maybe $400. But every episode, every time I didn't get sent home, I was like, yes, I just made $400. But I was so fortunate that my partner Tate sort of helped me train to be on the show, because I feel like I had a big skill gap, especially compared to the other people on the show. And it also came fortunately at a time where I was working for myself. And so I was able to be like, okay, I don't have to ask anyone where to go. I can just leave for a month and a half and see what happens and make $400 every week or so. So that's kind of how it went. It was really intimidating, but I'm glad I applied for it.
So, how did you find out you were selected? Did somebody call you or did you get an email?
Yes, it was funny because once you make the top 40, they do a video interview with you. And so I'd done this video interview, and they said, if you make it on the show, we'll call you on Friday. And Friday passes, they don't call me. The weekend passes, I don't get a phone call. And it wasn't until, and I'm at that point, I'm like, I don't want to be on that stupid show anyway. That's so lame, blah, blah, blah. And then Tuesday came around, and they're like, sorry it took us so long. Like, you're on the show. And I was like, oh, this is great. I'm like yelling. I'm like, oh my God, I'm so excited. I'm like jumping up and down, and they're like, and don't tell anyone. And I'm like, my boyfriend's right in front of me. Everyone knows, but I didn't really tell anyone. I was just so excited and then immediately terrified because I was like, whoa, in 1 month, I'm gonna have to be, in Hamilton, Canada, blowing glass for my life. It was very scary.
We'll return to Gemma Hollister in just a moment. This episode of Talking Out Your Glass is sponsored by His Glassworks Incorporated, diamond tools and glass cold working supplies. Suppliers of diamond-plated tools and accessories, including diamond laps, wheels, belts, and adhesives. Expert advice available at hisglassworks.com. This episode is sponsored by the Corning Museum of Glass, the only place to experience work from the hit glass blowing show Blown Away. Enjoy art by fan favorite Gemma Hollister. Want to give glassmaking a go? Try your hand at the expanded Make Your Own Glass workshop or sign up for a class taught by Gemma at the world-renowned studio in 2026. Learn more and plan your visit today at cmog.org. This episode of Talking Out Your Glass is sponsored by Mobile Glassblowing Studios, LLC, the leading manufacturer of small-scale portable glassblowing equipment. Their innovative lines of Dragon and Phoenix furnaces, CAT60 annealing tubes, and related accessories are perfect for any studio from beginner to total professional. Find them on Instagram and Facebook at mobileglassblowingstudios.com. And now, we return to Gemma Hollister. Did you find out who the other candidates were going to be at that same time?
No, it was actually a complete secret. So we didn't find out who the other contestants were until like the very first day of filming when we're all like walking on set for the first scene. They like had us walk in the line like with our heads down so we couldn't see who anyone else was because they wanted our genuine reaction like on screen. So it was not until that day and it was I had known Morgan Peterson previously because we had met at Pilchuck. And so it was so relieving to see a friendly face there in such an intimidating environment.
That was kind of an intimidating group of people, lots of people with tons of experience in that particular group.
Oh, yes. That and yeah, I'm like, and that's even an understatement. Holy crap. I literally looked around and I was like, okay, cool. This is going to be fun and it really was so incredible to have that opportunity to connect with these other artists in that way. I feel like we sort of like trauma bonded by the stress of being on TV and so it was pretty incredible to be among that group of people.
Well, how did the real life experience of Blown Away differ from what you imagined?
I'll be honest. So when I found out I was going to be on the show, I rewatched all of Blown Away and I would sit there with my notebook and I would write down the challenges. I'd write down the time. I'd write down who won and I would sketch out what I would have made. And then I'd try to figure out like how long different things would take me. And to be honest, I would watch it and I would look on the screen and I'd be like, some of this stuff looks really like chopped and put together. Some of it looks like not so refined. I was like, this is gonna be easy. Like I am like if my work is gonna look like my work's gonna look so good. It's gonna be so great. And then when I got in the hot shop, you realize how difficult the entire situation is. You're working in a completely new studio with equipment that's not used all the time, so it's not super dependable. Under like extreme pressure and such a time limit that the fact that anyone ever got anything on a pedestal on Blown Away ever, I really feel like is a miracle. So if you're a glassblower like I was watching it and thinking like I could do that easily. No, it was so difficult. Um, Everything was like held together by hot glue and popsicle sticks and everything. So it was a lot harder than it looked.
How big of a factor was the time limitation? Because I assume you hadn't really worked like that before.
Yeah, it was definitely something that I had to practice. I had had friends who were on previous seasons of Blown Away. Jason McDonald's a really good friend of mine. And so I sort of was like, all right, let's sit down. Let's talk about like how things went because I need to just, sorry, police going by. I need to make sure that I can do the best I can. And so I would literally like time myself. Like I would practice. They also told us, and this season that scale was an important factor. So I'd practice making a cylinder, maybe 14 inches long, and I'd time myself. How long does it take me to make a cylinder? How long does it take me to make a lid? How long does it take me to make certain basic shapes and like certain repeated shapes? And so I would time myself, and I would even in my hotel room, because spoiler alert, you do get the prompt the night before. Otherwise, nothing would make it on those pedestals. And I would sit in my hotel room and make cardboard cutouts of all the pieces that I'd make to figure out the scale. And I would measure them with calipers. And I would like calculate the time based on what I knew I could make in a certain amount of times, because it was a very strict time limit of exactly 6 hours or exactly 5 hours or whatever it was.
So, what ended up being your favorite challenge?
By far the partner challenge with Karen. That was just the coolest experience ever, to have a glass artist that you look up to, that you think is super cool, and be able to work on a team with them in this like in this crazy setting was just awesome. I felt like I was not only like in awe the whole time, but I really feel like I had made a lot of friends during my time on the show, Karen definitely being one of them. And being able to work with her and then winning was just like, oh my God, we were like crying. And it was an unforgettable experience, that challenge.
Remind us what you guys made.
We made a piece called Modern Nature. And it was sponsored by Chihuly Garden and Glass, the prize was. And so obviously Chihuly's work, inspired by nature, we had to make an installation. And so we had made these crows that were flying down with these leaves falling into a pile of trash. So there was like banana peels and plastic water bottles and dog poop bags. And Karen made these beautiful crows. And it was super fun.
Well, what was your favorite piece made by another artist during the show?
Honestly, it's hard to say any one piece, but like anything Ryan Thompson made was just incredible. I feel like when you watch the show as not a glassblower, they sort of had this narrative of like, Ryan is technical and he makes goblets, but like the dude can seriously make anything. And if you would see his sketchbooks, they were just absolutely stunning. And so I would say I like the piece that he made for the like Fear Spooky Challenge, but oh, for the Fear Spooky Challenge, I love Zombie Foggy, the one that Karen made, but like literally everything Ryan turned out was like actually looked good in person. It was incredible.
What did you feel like was the best piece you made during the competition?
Hmm. I would say the That's hard to say. My favorite piece was the last piece that I made. It was called Doom Scroll Ad Infinitum, and it was these hamster tubes. And I just really enjoyed that idea. Though with the time limit, I think that the piece could have been executed better. And I've later made versions of that piece that I like a lot more. But I would say like the one that probably looked the most refined was in the horror challenge. We had to do like a horror challenge, and I made this like Cinderella slipper and this dove covered in blood and these eyeballs, which was sort of one of my first times really sculpting anything. And so it was really difficult, but I think it turned out nice for a first iteration.
So, when did you fear that you would be eliminated? Did you have that sense before the time that you were eliminated?
I was most fearful uh during like the first episode and the second episode. And I think by the time I got to episodes like 4 and 5, I was just like, I've I've proven what I need to prove. That if anything else from here on out is a bonus, I was in it to win it the whole time. I feel like the interviewers would often ask me, how does it feel to be the youngest? How does it feel to be the least experienced? And I was like, I don't know. I'm not thinking about that. I'm trying to win just like everybody else. And so when it started coming down to, the certain like the final of us, I was like, I think we all sort of thought it could be anyone's game at that point. And so on episode 7, when I was sent home, I was bummed, and then instantly I was like, "Oh, I get to go home," and then I would be like, "Ah, I get to go home." And I think all my castmates were a little bit jealous because everyone was getting pretty homesick at that point.
So, how has your life changed since you were on the show?
It's mostly this. I think mostly the same in that I think I've sort of been on like a similar trajectory, regardless of being on Blown Away or not. But it is pretty strange. I've had a couple times people will recognize me. Um, And it just feels like super bizarre. But I think, we also live in a world where people are like micro famous in so many different ways, like being on Instagram or, whatever. But I do feel like I have had some opportunities that were definitely linked to Blown Away, being able to do demonstrations at the Corning Museum of Glass, for example, or maybe just having my name maybe slightly more well known has given me a bit more of an advantage as far as um, maybe just opportunities. And so I feel really grateful that I've done it. Oh, and it has changed my life in some other ways too. Like I was able to have a show at Traver with Morgan and Karen, and that is something like I never would thought would have ever happened. And so that like certain it's been different in that certain specific opportunities have been presented that otherwise wouldn't have. And it feels the same in that I was starting my studio and doing production before the show, and I'm still doing the same thing now.
Did it change your goals for the work itself, for your work?
Hmm. Well, I think in some ways, I don't know if it changed my goals, but I think in some ways it maybe made it harder to stick with my goals because you make things that people see on TV, things that you made within 24 hours and produced, but it's the most viewership you've ever had for your work. And so I think that people have seen maybe the work that I made on Blown Away and then seen the work that I make in undergrad and are like, this is Gemma's work. But in my mind, it's Gemma's early work. And I'm still so much in this process of like evolution within my own work and still figuring out what my voice is, that it's easy to be like, well, people like this thing I made on Blown Away. I should keep making this thing. Instead of, I'm actually interested in this other idea and I should pursue it, regardless of whether or not anyone's given it attention. And so I think I've had to like ground myself and remember what it is I enjoy doing and what I care about pursuing, and not just I need to do this because I did it on Blown Away, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Well, you said I gained so much confidence in myself as a gaffer and an artist. Looking back, it was also very special to me to be able to represent a younger generation of glassblowers, especially female glassblowers, on
Mm.
such a big stage. Say more about that. What was your biggest takeaway from the experience?
So I would say, when you're learning to blow glass, a lot of it is assisting, or a lot of it is failing, a lot of it is things breaking. And I was putting myself in an environment where I was going to be the leader at my bench, and I also could not afford to have anything break. And so it sort of put me in this mindset of radical responsibility that like every single thing that happens at the bench, I'm completely responsible for. And it really forced me to just make things happen and just be confident in every decision and really think things through. So I think as far as like skill and confidence, it definitely was a big push for me. Um, and yeah, I really wanted to try to represent myself well and sort of this like younger generation of glass um, that I am a part of on the show. Um, in ways, there have been contestants before, like Momo Schaefer and like other people that I've watched, or even like Edgar Valentine, being younger and just being like, okay, yeah, these people are out there, not afraid to put themselves um, in front of in this scenario. And I also thought that if I was on the show, even if I didn't do very well, people would still see me trying. And I thought that that was sort of the message I wanted to convey, that it's okay for people to see you try. I think that like sincerity is a really important thing, and so just putting yourself out there, even if it's not going to be your best self, because you can't always control that, was sort of my goal. Just showing people like, hey, somebody's out there trying, and that's okay, and that's exciting, and that should be encouraging for you.
So, how did your blown away experience influence your residency at Monterey Glassworks?
Mm. Well, I would say, so my relationship with Monterey Glassworks is that it was actually my first glass job. So Nate Sambar had hired me the summer of, was it 2021? Yeah, summer 2021. And I sort of worked there that summer as an intern. And so during that time, Ayaoki was an artist in residence at Monterey Glassworks. And so I got to see her, just like this badass artist, work through this residency and assist her. And so, in turn, when I got the residency, I was already inspired by my experience at Monterey Glassworks. And then I had the Traver show coming up. And so I was like, okay, I know exactly what it is that I want to make. It's these pieces based on things that I made up, blown away, and Nate and the whole gang, Anthony and Will Bell, were just like so helpful and helped me think of different ways to make these pieces. So it was sort of like a little bit of a homecoming and made me really excited because they helped me get to where I was, where I could be on Blown Away. And then when I was on Blown Away, I got to come back and make work based on what I was doing at Blown Away. So it's just really special experience to have people just committed to making your work for a week. It's really just feels like such an honor.
When was the Traver show that you had with Karen and Morgan?
It was this time last year, so it was October of 2024.
And how was that? Did you all make things that you had visited or thought about during Blown Away?
A little bit. I know. So yeah, I think we did, and maybe not even on purpose necessarily. It was sort of our the thread that connected us in this show was having been on Blown Away. Karen made these beautiful chrysalises that were um, based on her final piece on Blown Away. I had made my hamster tubes based on my piece on Blown Away, and as well as a still life piece, a bit based on the modern nature piece Karen and I had made together. And Morgan made her blood splatter and her knives and all those things. So I think all those pieces were inherent to our own practices that we brought to Blown Away, and then we brought back out at this show together. And it was so fun. I just felt like the coolest person in the world being next to the two of them in the gallery.
We'll return to Gemma Hollister in just a moment. This episode of Talking Out Your Glass is sponsored by the Art Alliance for Contemporary Glass. AACG is a not-for-profit organization and leading resource for glass collectors, enthusiasts, artists, gallerists, museum personnel, and educators on all things related to glass art. Like this podcast, AACG provides a collaborative place for the glass community to have robust conversations around glass art and conducts monthly virtual programming that's free and open to all. In addition, AACG regularly distributes exhibit grants and artist scholarships. At its core, the mission of AACG is to further the development and appreciation of art made from glass. For more information, visit aacgglass.org. This episode of Talking Out Your Glass is sponsored by Wet Dog Glass. In business since 1996, Wet Dog Glass delivers unsurpassed value to glass studios like the Corning Museum of Glass and others around the globe. Offerings include turnkey hot glass studio equipment, studio planning consultation, and technical support. Wet Dog Glass, your studio's best friend. For more information, visit wdg-us.com. This episode of Talking Out Your Glass is sponsored by Haystack Mountain School of Crafts. From a stunning coastal Maine campus, Haystack connects people through craft. Haystack offers 1- and 2-week studio workshops to participants of all skill levels from June through August, taught by professional artists from the U.S. and abroad. The school celebrates 75 years of programming during the summer 2026 session. Haystack's catalog is now available online. Glass faculty include Christopher Kerr-Iyer, Cedric Mitchell, and Megan Stiles. Studio assistant fellowships are available. Applications are open on January 6, 2026. The fellowship application deadline is January 30th. The general workshop application deadline is February 20th. For workshop descriptions and to register, visit haystackmountain.org. That's haystack-mtn.org. And now, back to Gemma Hollister. Well, let's talk about some of your work. I wanted to ask you about feedback loop. Describe and discuss that piece.
So that piece is based on the piece I had made on Blown Away, the final piece, Doom Scroll ad infinitum. And I sort of thought, okay, what is like my idealized version of this piece? What is it really going to look like when I do it well? So I made this piece at Monterey Glassworks, and it's a series of oversized blown glass plastic hamster tubes. I really love it. To me, it almost feels like a joke making glass look like plastic because it's the one thing that I think we often don't want it to look like, or we think that it's the material is sort of the opposite of. But it has this plastic nature to it in that it can become liquid and hold form. And it can also be replicated and mass produced super easily. So I sort of took this bright nostalgic image of the hamster tube, and I made it in this rig that has no end. So there's no in, there's no out. Um, to not talk too much about hamsters, I have a pet hamster that I love, and those plastic hamster tubes that they sell at the pet store are like not proper for hamsters to be in, but what they're supposed to mimic is burrowing. But they're sort of just this brightly colored fake version of burrowing. So they're not really very stimulating or like proper for a hamster. And so for me, I think that having that imagery in a loop becomes an analogy for my own experiences with mental health and maybe times where I've just been, stuck in a certain pattern or stuck in a certain, certain episode of mental health or stuck just kind of getting the same like negative feedback from doom scrolling and I people always when I see the piece are like, where's the hamster? Is there supposed to be a hamster and a gerbil in it? But I want them to kind of look at the piece and go, oh, this thing would be inescapable. This thing's actually claustrophobic. And though it seems brightly colored and nostalgic and playful on the outside, it's something a little more claustrophobic on the inside.
Yeah, it seems like it could represent life in general at this moment.
Yes, yes. And I want that's like, I think what it means to me, but I also think that for me it is important that the ideas are like somewhat easily digestible enough that people can put their own interpretation on it. And so yeah, that's what that piece is about for me. And it feels very contemporary.
Tell us about Still Life number one.
So that piece is sort of this black goblet that has these little cigarette butts on it, banana peels, chewed up pieces of gum. And it's in part inspired by the piece Modern Nature that I made with Karen on Blown Away. For me, part of it is just whenever I'm making new work, I'm learning something. And again, I've only been blowing glass about 6 years. And so for me, I was like, okay, this is a challenge to learn sculpting and what are the things that I want to sculpt and what are the things that I interact with on the daily. And I live in an urban environment and the things that I see on the streets are mostly trash and mostly these sort of little habitual things that people interact with every day. And I just found those individual shapes to be really fun to try to sculpt. And the cigarette butts were the most fun to sculpt. I was like cutting up little pieces of cane and fusing them and dipping them to make the ashes. And that piece actually sold at Traver, and I was really excited because that was like the first real piece of my artwork that I ever sold, and I just will always remember that.
Did that surprise you at all? It feels maybe like someone wouldn't want to have a piece that had cigarette butts as, main focus of it.
Yeah, you know, it's funny, I thought that as well, but I guess it also I don't know the person who bought it, but I think that there's something like playfully interactive about it. And also the the sculpture isn't so photorealistic. Everything's a little bit hyper pigmented and a little bit bright that it doesn't look nasty. It looks like maybe a brighter cartoonish version of the trash. Um, which might make it a bit more approachable, I think.
That's exciting when someone buys a piece of your work, isn't it? Because you just get that validation that someone is getting what I'm trying to say here.
Yeah, yeah, and enough so that they're like, all right, I'll put my money where my mouth is and say, I love this thing so much that I want to have it. It just feels like so crazy. And but I also love that like most in some ways most people who are ever going to interact with your art are going to do so by seeing it in a photo or seeing it on Instagram. And so I love that I'm able to share my work with so many people, and also people can have the work. I like that there's not like an exclusivity necessarily to like owning the work, making it yours. And if you're listening and you have that work, let me know. I hope you're enjoying it, and I hope it's everything you wanted.
One of your stained glass pieces that I really like is input and output again and again. Tell us about that work.
Thank you. Yeah, so that piece is sort of like an installation projection that I've paired with my Hitchbot and Paradise stained glass. And so I have this stained glass window that it's so funny because I feel like I've talked about it a million times now when you do like a slide presentation somewhere. Because this was like the first work that I thought really expressed an idea that I was excited about. And so it features this hitchhiking robot named Hitchbot that hitchhiked across Germany and the Netherlands and came to the United States, started in Boston and was headed for California, but was beheaded in my lovely city of Philadelphia. So I sort of made this mandorla shape in stained glass to commemorate that figure. And outside of it had this projection that was these sort of like growing bits of I was actually videos of these like ink splatters that I was doing. But in that was just like overlaid hours of just me scrolling on my phone and just different bits of information, trying to make the digital experience and sort of that idea of like meme art in stained glass something physical that people could experience. And I thought it was a lot of fun. It felt very artsy, very art schooly.
Talk a little bit about I'm just trying to make sense of it all.
So that piece was also in my show, and it was a floor installation that was made up of. It was a structured piece of stained glass that was made up of a 3D stained glass. When I'd previously spoken about that ink projection, these were um, Rouge paint, sort of ink splatters that I then fused onto the glass and then built this structure out of. And so it was sort of all of these random patterns that I then went in and over the entire stained glass dome created these marks that connected them and made different paths. And so, maybe sort of a basic statement, but sort of visually, I think it was about um, finding like pattern and organization and flow in chaos and amongst these like random bits of ink splatter. And then it was sort of related to more of these themes about like self growth and technology and um, things like that I was working at in the whole show. So it related sort of to the input output piece. It related to this other stained glass dome that I had, and it was sort of this like shelter where I'd made all these little marks. So it was a fun piece, and by the end of it, it was so like I built it so shoddily that I had to take apart the entire piece, and now I just have all of the individual stained glass triangles in a box to one day be built again.
What inspired your work, Heaven is Full of Junk?
So Heaven is Full of Junk was sort of based on this one piece that I had made. That title for the show, for my BFA show, was based on the one stained glass dome that I had made that was called Maybe Kessler Was Right, but at least we have Wi-Fi. And it was this stained glass dome. I was really inspired by learning about stained glass. And I think it was Abbot Suger was a French theologian who said that stained glass had the power to make divine light visible. And so this idea that glass had this divine power, I wanted to create this dome that you looked up into. And I learned also about the Kessler theory that if you throw enough low Earth or low orbit objects into space, eventually their collisions will compound so much that we'll never be able to continue to travel into space. And so I thought of the idea of looking up into this stained glass dome, into divine light, into heaven, and just seeing garbage and space trash. And so I had made that piece and thought that Heaven is Full of Junk would be a good idea for that collection of work.
So, how much of your work is stained and blown, and what determines if you use a cold process or a hot process to express your ideas or story in glass?
Mm. So I think, yeah, I think I touched on this a little bit earlier, but I think the reason I really was using stained glass at the time was because it was the only medium within glass that I felt I had had enough skill in to actually be able to fully express my ideas. I think I'm honestly now just beginning to be able to do so in hot glass because there is such a learning curve. And I think that though I do admire other people who maybe have like a more abstract style of working or their glass, their blown glass is a bit more free form. I just know that that's not intrinsic to like how I want to be creating work. And so I think that when I was using cold processes, for me, it felt a bit of a workaround to get my ideas out there. And it definitely made sense at the time to use stained glass for the work that I was making. But I do feel now that I am like fully in it in the hot shop. And now that I have started to build up a bit more skills and am able to create objects and I've also learned that I enjoy making work that's not limited by the scale of the furnace and by the scale of the bench and of the glory hole. And so like feedback loop, for example, is such a combination of hot process and cold working. Half of the piece is cold worked and Loctite glued together. So I think for me, I definitely work through an idea and find out what is the best means to the end for that process. I'm definitely more interested in blown glass work just as my passion and what I do daily. But I think in every idea I have, I think the fun is figuring out how do I make this work? What's the solution to this piece?
Gemma, how do you see your work or your practice evolving?
Sometimes I sometimes I get so overwhelmed with the possibilities. I mean, you can really spend your whole life like even within the hot shop working on marini or working on vessels or working on these things. So sometimes I think that I I can't even choose a path sometimes, but I think that I see my work evolving um by spending more time on an individual project than on um so like for example, as I was saying before with production, I work so quickly. I see my work evolving into bigger pieces that I take a lot more time on. Like feedback loop, for example. And but sometimes, gosh, I just get so inspired. I have no idea. Who knows? I never knew I was going to be doing stained glass. I feel like maybe one day I'll take a sculpting class or a marine class or something. And um, I like that I don't know. I find it very frustrating, but I like that I don't quite know where I see it evolving yet.
So, what's coming up for you in 2026? Do you have any classes, exhibitions?
So it's funny. I think about 2026. I'm like, I hope nothing. I hope I just get to spend time in my studio. I spend so much time out of it. And I'm like, man, I have this awesome studio space. I should be spending all my time there making my own work. But I will be teaching at the Corning Museum of Glass with my partner, Tate, this summer in August, which I'm super excited for. It's a 2 week class, and I just feel like we're just going to go so hard as teachers. We're just going to be so excited and enthusiastic. So if you're listening and you are interested, our class is going to be called Draw It, Make It, Sell It. And it's sort of a bit of a production class, but more about how do you envision a design and then make it something that you can make efficiently in the hot shop, even if it's just a cylinder, even if it's whatever it is. But I do see myself trying to get more involved, specifically in Philadelphia in the artistic community. I live right next to a lot of really cool independent galleries and maker spaces and things like that. So I see myself really trying to spend as much time in Philadelphia working on my own work as I can.
You said the act of creating glass, as in many crafts, is a protest against an unresolved and rapidly evolving technological world.
Mm.
Explain that. Say more.
So I think about why it is that I enjoy blowing glass, why it is that I feel so fortunate to be an artist. And we really live, sounds so like I'm up on my soapbox, but we really live in like a world where we can buy something and get it instantly, tomorrow via Amazon. And, at the expense of other people sometimes. And I think that being somebody who is taking the time to make things by hand, by caring about the things that I make, and being able to connect to other people who care about those things too, enough to either appreciate the work or to purchase the work, feels like my little protest against all of this, just all of these things that are just out of our control. I think that sometimes we evolve things so much without asking whether or not we should, not necessarily like reining things in. And I think that being able to, when I blow glass, one thing that I love is that you sort of get to figure out like the mystery of why things happen in the hot shop. Like first you're like learning and you're like, man, this thing cracked. I have no idea why. And you get a bit better and you realize, oh, this is why it cracked. And then if I do this, it won't crack. And if I do this, the glass will act this way. So it gives me this sense of control and this sense of care. And even though I might not be able to control everything that's going on in the world or in my world, when I'm in the hot shop, I get to take responsibility for every individual piece that I make. And that is just my pride and my joy as an artist.
Do you feel like technology has been a help or a hindrance to humanity?
Well, that's a big question. I think it depends on the day that you're asking me. Obviously technology has done a lot to help people, medical advancements, transportation, all sorts of things are pretty incredible. But I guess in the way that it interacts with my art specifically, I still feel I still feel like I don't know. I do not love that we have to kind of like pimp ourselves out on social media to get attention, but I also love that more people than will ever meet me get to experience my art, get to see the things that I'm working on and the things that I care about. And so I think it can be a really positive thing as much as it can be a really negative thing. And so I try to think about, if my work was just hold up, if I was making work during the Renaissance, I'd have one piece of work and it'd be in a rich person's house and no one would get to see it. But now I can make something and so many people get to experience it and connect with it and connect to it. And to me, I think that's a pretty positive thing.
Thanks for tuning in to Talking Out Your Glass. Happy holidays, everyone, and until next time, stay glassy.